Welcome back to Sissy Maya. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to never miss an update. Additionally, consider subscribing to my Patreon to get access to these features, and much more. Someone once said that good intentions pave the road to trouble. I've come to believe that old saying, and here's why. I've always been pretty easygoing, even when I was 14. Back then, I got along well with my family and shared a strong bond with my twin sister, Emily. We'd always cover for each other, offering alibis to avoid trouble for our minor misdeeds. So, it wasn't surprising when one morning, we were sitting together in the garden and Sue said to me, "Jack, I need a big favor." She had timed it perfectly. Just a week earlier, she had taken my place at a school outing to see a ballet performance of Swan Lake and Coppelia. Why they sent boys from my school to watch ballet, I'll never understand, but it was supposed to broaden our appreciation for the arts. I managed to dodge it somehow. When she returned, I covered for her so convincingly that both teachers and parents believed I had attended. Grateful, I had told Sue I owed her one, foolishly promising to do anything she asked in return. So, when she finally asked for that favor, I didn't hesitate. "Sure, sis, anything. I haven't forgotten what you did for me. You promise?" "No backing out." "I promise." I gave my word, I replied firmly. "What do you need?" She grinned. "Just as you wanted out of your ballet trip, I need out of my end-of-term museum trip. Normally, I wouldn't care, but it's on the same day as the outdoor concert in Horsham, and Angela Sewell has tickets. She knows someone in the band and promised we'd meet them afterward. I can't miss this, Jack." "Well, how can I help?" I asked. "You can't be in two places at once." "No," she said, a slight smile playing on her lips. "That's where you come in. You've just started your holidays, but I still have a few days left. Jack, I need you to take my place on the school excursion." I immediately understood her plan and didn't like it. "What?" I exclaimed. "Are you serious? How am I supposed to pass myself off as you? I'd have to wear your school uniform, a wig, and fool your classmates and teachers. It's too risky. If we're caught, we'll both be in trouble. Sue, you can't be serious." She paused, then continued calmly. "Jack," she said, "I've thought this through. There won't be any problems. First, you're my size, so my uniform will fit you perfectly. Second, I've borrowed a good quality wig in your color. Third, I've discussed the idea with the girls in my class, and they think it's a great plan. Fourth, we'll all meet at the museum where our supervisors will be museum staff and a couple of part-time teachers who don't know what I look like anyway." She looked at me, raising an eyebrow. "So, there's no problem unless you want to break your promise?" She knew exactly how to press my buttons. I prided myself on never going back on my word. I hesitated, unable to think of another objection, and reluctantly agreed. "Well, I suppose it might work," I said hesitantly. "But if this goes wrong, we're both in trouble." "It won't," Sue beamed, hugging me gratefully. "Jack, you're an amazing brother. No one else would do this." "Yeah, because no one else is crazy enough," I replied with a half-smile. "Okay, let's do it, but you need to brief me thoroughly. I need to know everyone's names in your class. Let's go through your last school photo so I can remember who's who." "Can we trust everyone?" "Of course," my sister smiled reassuringly. "Actually, one of them suggested the idea." "Don't worry, it'll be fine." "Fine?" I said ruefully. "It won't be fine if anyone from my school sees me. I'd never live it down." "Oh, don't worry, we'll take care of that. All the girls will keep it to themselves, I promise. And if any of your mates see you, they won't recognize you by the time we've finished with you." I wasn't sure whether to be comforted or worried by that. Over the next few days we went over the plan to fine-tune it, and several of Sue's school friends came round in the evenings to help with my preparation. Mum must have wondered why we were spending so much time upstairs in Emily's room, but she didn't say anything. They taught me how to walk like a girl, sit and stand like a girl, and even how to talk like a girl with all its subtle mannerisms. Fortunately, my voice hadn't broken. They tried to cover every contingency, and finally decided that I was ready. It was lucky for our plan that Dad was overseas on business, and Mum had to leave very early on the day of the school outing, so the coast would be clear. In addition, the girls were not meeting at the museum until 11 o'clock, so my sister would have plenty of time to get me ready before her school friends came to collect me. On the morning of the outing, I was woken by Emily, who had already been up for a while. "Come on, Jack, up you get," she said, "off to the bathroom, and when you've washed, go into my room and I'll get you dressed." I did as I was told, and was soon standing in her room, where I took off my pajamas. Emily and I had seen each other unclothed since birth, so I wasn't bashful at her seeing me undressed. Her school uniform was already laid out ready for me. "Okay, Jack," she said, "knickers first." She held out a pair of maroon school knickers, and I stepped into them. She pulled them up to my waist and high up my legs, and the elastic felt tight around my thighs and waist. A white vest followed, and she tucked it into the waist of the knickers. Next came a white blouse buttoned up to the neck, followed by a maroon and silver diagonally striped tie. "And now for one item that I really hate wearing," said Fiona, "our regulation school gym tunic." She picked it up and held it with the back opening towards me. "In you get," she said. I stepped into the grey tunic and she pulled it up my body before putting my arms through the armholes. Then she stood behind me and fastened the buttons running up the back. Turning me around, she did up the buckle belt and secured the 2 buttons which held the end of the belt in place. Pulling down the hem of the tunic so that the pleated skirt hung neatly, Fiona said, "Sit down." I sat on the chair, and she pulled a pair of white ankle socks onto my feet and turned them down neatly at the ankle. On top of these came a pair of her brown T-bar strap shoes, which she fastened on securely with the buckles at the side. Definitely a junior style, and designed not to come off. Opening a drawer, Fiona retrieved a mid-brown pageboy-style wig that matched my hair color perfectly. She meticulously brushed through it before turning to face me. "This might be a bit embarrassing," she warned, "but it'll completely change your appearance. Sit up straight and keep your head still." I followed her instructions, and she carefully placed the wig on my head, brushing it into place. Emily stepped back to assess the result. "Perfect," she smiled. "Now, stand up." As she held out her maroon school blazer, I slipped my arms into the sleeves. She draped it over my shoulders, adjusting my blouse sleeves to match the blazer cuffs. Stepping back, she admired her work. "There we go," she said proudly. "One little new girl, ready for her first day at Sion Convent. You really do look like a junior schoolgirl in that uniform. Those part-time teachers will never mistake you for a boy. Take a look in the mirror." I glanced at my reflection and couldn't believe the transformation. Before me stood a quintessential Sion schoolgirl, the slightly oversized uniform giving the perfect impression of a new student. "Well, Jack, now you'll know what I endure 5 days a week," Sue grinned. "For once, you get to experience it too. You look great though, so I think you'll pass just fine. Let's go downstairs for breakfast, the others will be here soon." Downstairs, I felt the gym tunic's constriction as I moved around. It was far from comfortable. Breakfast was quick, and soon there was a knock at the door. Emily answered, ushering in her friends Hilary, Gillian, Tessa, and Fiona. They were dressed in their school uniforms and carried their Macintoshes, clearly expecting rain. Entering the lounge where I stood, they gathered around to inspect me. "Well," remarked Hilary, "that's pretty convincing. If you saw him on the street, you'd never think twice he'd pass for another schoolgirl. Those teachers won't suspect a thing. Yep, he'll do just fine." "What do you think, Tess?" Fiona asked. "No problem," Tessa replied. "He looks good." Gillian grinned at me and commented, "He looks perfect." Fiona added, "I wouldn't mind him filling in for me on a few school trips." "He looks great." "Well, I'm satisfied with how he looks," Emily said. "So, you might as well go. But before you do, I want to take some pictures of Jack, just for the record." She fetched her camera from the sideboard. "Come on," she said, leading us outside to the garden where the lighting was better. The girls gathered around, snapping photos of me from every angle. Once done, we returned indoors to prepare to leave. "He'll need a raincoat too," Fiona remarked. "It's going to start pouring soon, and if we put the hood up, it'll hide his face well." "Great idea," Emily agreed. "Wait here, I'll get it." She went to the hall, took down her school Macintosh from a coat hook, and returned with it. "Here we go," she said cheerfully, handing it to me. Turning to me, she teased, "Now, Jack, you get to experience the most hated part of our school uniform, the regulation school Macintosh. We have to wear them all the time, so I don't see why you shouldn't suffer for once." It was a typical, somewhat old-fashioned single-breasted girls' school Macintosh made of unlined light grey rubberized cotton. It featured a buckle belt with 2 keepers, one on each side of the waist. The shoulders held a non-detachable hood with a square top, a common style for girls' school raincoats. The hood had a maroon lining and tie tapes to secure it under the chin. Emily held it up for me to put on, and I obediently slid my arms into the sleeves. Standing before me, she buttoned it up to the neck, then tightened the belt around my waist, securing it with the buttonhole at the end. I stood there examining the very juvenile-style Macintosh, which, like the rest of the uniform, was too big for me. The hem fell about 8 inches below my knees, and the cuffs reached halfway along my fingers. I certainly looked like a new little girl. "Now you see why we hate these," Fiona remarked. "They're fine for little girls aged 8 or 10, but at our age, you feel ridiculous wearing them. We're the laughingstock of girls from other schools." "Tell me about it," Sue sighed, checking her watch. "Okay, you better get going." We all gathered in the hall, and upon opening the door, we saw that the rain had started to pour heavily. "Right, Jack," Sue said, "let's put your hood up now. By the way, Fiona had a good idea earlier. With your hood up, you'll be well covered and less likely to be recognized. So, I need you to keep that hood up all day. I know you might want to take it off if it gets too hot, but you mustn't, okay?" I nodded reluctantly, not keen on keeping the hood up all day, especially indoors at the museum. She pulled the Macintosh hood over my head, securing the ties under my chin in a bow and adjusting it snugly around my face. "There," Emily said, "that should keep you cozy. What do you think, Fiona?" "Perfect," Fiona replied with a grin. "He does look rather adorable, doesn't he?" "That's the idea," Hillary chimed in. "Come on, everyone, let's go." Emily held the door open for us, adding, "Now, Jack, everything hinges on you. Do exactly what Fiona or Hillary tells you, and everything will be fine." "Got it." I nodded uncertainly, knowing it was too late to back out now. Before heading out into the pouring rain, the girls all donned their Macintoshes. Once buttoned and belted, they pulled up their hoods and secured them with ties under their chins, though some had buttoned flaps instead. We stepped onto the street as Sue closed the door behind us, making our way along the pavement to the bus stop. We stood there in the rain for a few minutes until the bus arrived. After paying our fares, Fiona and Hillary guided me to the back of the bus. Several other schoolgirls in Sion Convent uniforms were already seated there, most in grey Macintoshes identical to mine. As they settled in, they unfastened their hoods to hang down their backs. Following instructions, I kept my hood securely fastened, peering out from underneath. Fiona and Hillary introduced me to the other girls, prompting giggles throughout the bus. They seemed amused by the sight of a boy dressed as a girl. "I'd love to do this to my brother," one of them remarked. "We should try it on him sometime. Dress him up. I've got plenty of leverage to make him cooperate and take him into town as a little schoolgirl. Would you all help?" "Absolutely," another girl agreed. "Count me in, as long as you help me do the same to my brother." "And mine," added another girl. "All right," Fiona interjected, "that's enough talk about brothers. We'll deal with them another time. For today, let's focus on Jack pretending to be his sister, shall we? From now on, let's all call Jack by his sister's name, Emily. Sound good, everyone?" I couldn't help but protest. "Oh, come on. Do you really have to do that?" "Of course," Fiona replied firmly. You're supposed to be Emily today, so you better get used to it. I'm sure we can all manage that, Hilary chimed in with a laugh. So, here's Emily now. The key thing is not letting those part-time teachers catch on that Emily here isn't quite who she seems. When they ask about the hood indoors, I'll say Emily's feeling a bit under the weather and needs to stay warm. Unfortunately for Jack, Fiona continued, we all know how stuffy it gets wearing our school Macs indoors, especially when they're wet. Most of us are in our school summer dresses today, but Emily's decked him out in her winter uniform with the gym tunic and blazer. With that hood up, this Emily is going to roast, but it's a sacrifice she'll have to make. What's crucial is that we keep up the charade at any cost. Does everyone understand? A chorus of affirmations echoed through the bus. I could only imagine what the few other passengers thought of this spectacle. Two nearby women seemed amused, glancing and grinning at me intermittently. It dawned on me then that the road to hell truly is paved with good intentions. What began as a well-meaning favor for my sister had morphed into a potentially humiliating escapade at the hands of these girls. At this point, though, I was in too deep to turn back. The bus grew uncomfortably warm, and predictably, my damp, rubbery Macintosh soon became unbearable. The smell of rubber mingled with the heat, adding to my discomfort as I started to sweat profusely. The other girls had the luxury of shedding their Macintoshes, but just as I moved to loosen my hood, Fiona gently restrained my hands. Not yet, Jennifer, she said, smiling knowingly. We finally reached the city centre and disembarked from the bus. It was still raining, prompting those girls who had removed their Macintoshes on the bus to put them back on and pull up their hoods. The walk to the museum took only about 10 minutes. Once inside, the girls promptly shed their Macs, carrying them instead. Clearly, they were as eager to be rid of the hot, sticky garments as I was, though I had no such option, as Fiona and Hilary were quick to remind me. Several dozen other girls from Sion Convent were already present, and Fiona and her friends wasted no time briefing them on the situation. Apart from a few curious glances directed my way, they managed to keep my identity under wraps. Moments later, 2 part-time teachers and a museum staff member gathered us together, and the tour commenced. The dinosaur exhibit proved fascinating, and for a time, I forgot about my unusual attire and found myself enjoying the experience. However, Fiona and Hilary never strayed far from my side, which turned out to be fortunate. Suddenly, one of the teachers approached me and remarked, "You there, why do you still have your hood up? It must be unbearably warm." "Excuse me, miss," Fiona interjected swiftly, "she's recovering from laryngitis. The doctor advised her to stay warm." The teacher scrutinized me briefly and remarked, "Well, she does appear flushed. Perhaps she shouldn't have come, but since you're here, you may as well stay. All right, dear, keep your hood up, refrain from talking, and if you feel unwell, one of the girls can escort you home. By the way, what's your name, just in case?" I demurely replied, "Emily Carter, miss." The teacher noted down the name and moved on. Fiona grinned triumphantly. "It worked," she exclaimed. "Now let's enjoy the rest of the tour. It's turning out better than I expected." We proceeded with the tour, but as time passed, the stifling heat inside my Macintosh became unbearable. Against better judgment, I edged away from the group and swiftly removed my Macintosh, carrying it over my arm like the other girls. Fiona shot me a silent reproach, but there wasn't much she could do. I immediately felt more comfortable, though Hilary and Fiona now shadowed me closely. After about another hour, we were gathered around a case of fossils when Fiona suddenly looked up, panic evident on her face as she stared across the gallery. "Oh no," she whispered urgently. Hilary and I followed her gaze, and Hilary turned pale. "Oh dear, trouble's coming," she murmured. "What's wrong?" I asked, feeling my heart start to race. "It's Miss Frost and Miss Jones, our class teachers," explained Fiona. "If they spot you, it could get messy. Try to avoid them." I turned my attention to the display case, realizing my heart was pounding with anxiety. The two teachers approached our group and briefly spoke with the tour guides before positioning themselves behind us. We continued the tour, making sure to keep the main group between us and the teachers as much as possible. Everything might have gone smoothly if not for an unfortunate coincidence. As we neared the end of the tour in the museum's entrance hall, Miss Frost announced, "All right everyone, I'll just take a quick roll call before you disperse." Everyone stand still. It was the worst possible moment. I found myself directly in front of her, no more than 10 feet away. Miss Frost took out a clipboard and began calling out each girl's name, each responding promptly. Panic surged through me as the list of names progressed alphabetically. My heart nearly leaped out of my chest when she called, "Emily Carter." Silence followed. I hesitated, unable to muster the nerve to respond. It was a missed opportunity that could have saved the day. Miss Frost paused and called again, "Emily Carter, where are you?" Then, the unfortunate coincidence unfolded. The temporary teacher who had earlier spoken to me pointed in my direction and said confidently, "She's here. Why didn't you answer, girl?" Miss Frost scrutinized me, her brow furrowing. "Come here," she instructed. Blushing deeply, I reluctantly stepped forward and stood before her. Still puzzled, Miss Frost asked, "This isn't Emily Carter. What makes you think she is?" "Well, that's the name she gave me," explained the other teacher. "Just now, she was indoors with her Macintosh hood up, and when I asked why, her friend here mentioned she had laryngitis and needed to stay warm." Miss Frost studied me intently and remarked, "But this isn't Emily Carter. In fact, I don't know who you are. Who exactly are you, young lady?" At that moment, I knew the charade had unraveled. Tears of humiliation welled up as I quietly confessed, "I'm sorry, miss. I'm actually her brother." Miss Frost's expression shifted from disbelief to composed seriousness. Leaning forward, she reached out and removed my wig, prompting a nervous chuckle from the group. "Quiet," Miss Frost commanded sharply, her demeanor turning stern. "This is a serious matter. Who else is aware of this? I want answers, now." Fiona and Hilary reluctantly raised their hands, sparing the others from involvement. "Very well," Miss Frost continued, her tone unwavering. "The rest of you may go. You three, come with me." The group dispersed, leaving us to accompany Miss Frost and Miss Jones to their car. We sat in the back while they occupied the front seats, driving us back to the school. After a tense silence, Fiona timidly asked, "What's going to happen, miss?" "That depends on the headmistress," Miss Frost replied solemnly. "We're going to see her now, and she'll decide how to handle this situation. As for you, young man, and your sister, I suspect she's in for a rude awakening." The car sped on, pulling through the main gate of Sion Convent and stopping outside the imposing main entrance. We exited the car and were escorted through the entrance, down a corridor, until we faced a formidable wooden door labeled Miss Amelia Williams, Principal. Miss Jones knocked, and a commanding voice from within called, "Come in." Miss Frost opened the door, leading us into the office. Seated behind a large desk was a middle-aged woman with a commanding presence, Miss Amelia Williams, the headmistress. The two teachers stood beside her as she silently assessed us. "Well, what do we have here?" she finally inquired, her tone measured. Miss Frost wasted no time in explaining our presence there, recounting the incident. As Miss Williams questioned us and the girls, her initial puzzlement gave way to a faint hint of amusement, then settled into a penetrating stare that made me feel transparent under her scrutiny. After a lengthy pause, she remarked, "Well, Fiona and Hilary, as minor participants in this incident, your consequences will be decided at the start of next term. I'll determine your punishment during the holiday break. However, for you and your sister, young man, this is a more serious matter. I don't think you fully grasp the gravity of your actions. I'll be discussing this with your parents first, and then you'll be informed of my decision." Rising from her seat, she concluded, "That will be all for now. You may leave. Jack, you can walk home just as you are, without your wig for disguise. I'll return it to your mother later. Hopefully, Some of your friends will see you in this state. It might be quite embarrassing for you if they do." Mumbling apologies, the two girls and I exited the room. Outside, we silently made our way down to the school's main gate. I pulled up the hood of my raincoat to conceal my now obviously male head. As we walked home, Fiona remarked, "Well, we really messed up this time, didn't we? I'm truly sorry, Jack. I never imagined it would turn out like this. Old Mrs. Williams is known for her creative punishments, so brace yourself for the worst." Upon arriving home, as I opened the door and we stepped inside, Emily rushed out, bubbling with excitement. "The show was amazing," she began, then abruptly halted, sensing something amiss. We all gathered in the lounge, recounting the events. Her expression shifted from joy to despair as we finished. She looked at us solemnly and remarked, "Well, there's no use dwelling on it now. We'll have to face whatever comes our way." "Oh, Jack," she said, squeezing my hand, "I'm so sorry about this. If Miss Williams convinces Mum to leave your punishment in her hands, you'll need all the support you can get." After a while, the girls departed, and I changed back into my own clothes. Sue and I agreed not to divulge what had occurred to Mum, trusting that the headmistress of Sion Convent would inform her in due time. So, when Mum returned home and prepared our dinner, we kept silent. Looking back, it might have been wiser to have her on our side before she met Miss Williams. That was another mistake on our part. Sue and I heard nothing more about the incident for 3 whole days. Then, one morning during breakfast, Mum spoke up. "Well, you two, I had a rather interesting chat with Miss Williams yesterday. She asked me to come and see her, and I suppose you have an idea of what we discussed." Sue and I exchanged glances, our eating momentarily halted. "Yes, Mum," replied Sue softly, "we just didn't know how to bring it up." "What did she say?" "Well," continued Mum, "she was quite composed about it. Clearly, she thinks things through before acting. She gave me a detailed account of what occurred, but she also mentioned that it's only fair I hear your side of the story before we discuss what actions to take." So, what did happen? For the better part of an hour, we recounted every detail of our little adventure to Mum. Like the headmistress, Mum's expression shifted from a faint smile to a more serious frown of contemplation. When we had covered all our memories, she sat silently for a moment and said, "All right, now that I've heard both sides, I think I'm prepared for our meeting with Miss Williams this afternoon." "Our meeting?" Sue interjected, a hint of concern in her voice. "You mean we have to go too?" "Of course," replied Mum firmly. "You two are the central figures in this little drama. This afternoon, Miss Williams will decide what your punishment will be. You do understand that there must be consequences, don't you?" "Yes, of course," agreed Emily somberly. "It's just, I'm a bit apprehensive about what it might entail. Miss Williams does have quite the reputation." "Oh, come on, Sue," I scoffed. "It won't be like a caning back at my old school. Besides that, what else could really hurt?" "Oh, my poor Jack," sighed Sue, shaking her head. "Just wait and see. You'll find out soon enough." Breakfast continued in a rather subdued manner after that, and by early afternoon, Mum drove us to Sion Convent. Upon arrival, she parked the car by the gate, and we walked up to the main entrance. Inside, we found Miss Frost waiting for us. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Carter," she greeted warmly. "Thank you for being so punctual. I believe everyone else is here, so please come with me." We followed her down to the headmistress' office, where she instructed Emily and me, "You two wait outside until we call for you." With that, she ushered Mum into the office, and we strained to hear their conversation through the thick door, but unfortunately, the words were indistinct. After what felt like an eternity, Miss Frost finally opened the door and announced, "All right, you two, you may come in now." We entered the room to find ourselves confronted by an imposing group, all familiar faces. Behind the large desk sat Miss Williams, Mr. Matthews, my school's headmaster, of all people, what was he doing here, and Jennifer Taylor, the headmistress of St. Michael's Primary School. Mum and Miss Frost were seated to one side. Directly in front of the desk, 2 empty chairs awaited Emily and me. "Please sit down," instructed Miss Williams, her tone not entirely unkind. We sat upright, our nerves taut as Miss Williams began. "Now, Emily and James, I understand from your mother that you both acknowledge the seriousness of your actions and agree that some form of punishment is warranted for this misbehavior. As educators, our goal is not only to teach but also to foster responsible conduct. What you did, Emily, attending Jack's school outing to the ballet, and Jack, impersonating your sister on her outing, was highly irresponsible. It was not only an attempt to deceive us but could have had severe consequences in terms of liability and insurance implications in the event of an accident. It appears you have yet to fully grasp the potential repercussions of your actions. After careful consideration, I, with the agreement of my colleagues and your mother, have decided on your punishments." She turned her gaze to my sister. "Emily, as you continue to exhibit childish behavior, your punishment will be to attend St. Michael's Primary School for the first month of next term under the direct supervision of Miss Taylor here. You will be placed in the 8-year-olds class and treated accordingly. You will wear the primary school uniform both during evenings and weekends. Your mother will ensure occasional outings into town, where you will be exposed to public scrutiny." Emily paled at the announcement of her punishment, tears of humiliation streaming down her cheeks. I felt a pang of sympathy for her. Then, it was my turn. "And now, young man," continued Miss Williams, "your headmaster believes that a more sustained lesson than a brief punishment and detention is warranted. Moreover, your offense falls under our jurisdiction here at Scion Convent, so he has entrusted me to determine your fate. Given your recent performance, it seems you are quite comfortable in this school's uniform. Therefore, you will attend Scion Convent as a student for a period of 1 month. You will wear your sister's school uniform during school hours, evenings, and weekends, just as Emily will wear hers. I dare say the 2 of you will make a charming sight around town together. While attending this school, you will be placed in the junior section, housed separately to avoid any contact with Hilary, Fiona, and their peers. They will face separate consequences. You'll be integrated into a class of 12-year-old girls, which I'm sure you'll find quite an experience." A faint smile briefly crossed her lips as she imagined the scenario. "Now, one more thing. To ensure you both keep up with your regular schoolwork, you will continue to complete your usual homework in the evenings and on weekends. Jack, this means you'll need to come to your own school every day dressed in your Scion uniform to collect your assignments. I suspect the boys there will give you quite a reception to remember. You have access to a computer at home, and both schools are online, so you'll have all the support you need. Any questions?" There were none, so she concluded, "Very well, that will be all. I expect Mrs. Carter to ensure that both of you comply fully with your school uniform requirements. Thank you, everyone. James, I look forward to seeing you here on the first day of term. Goodbye." We all stood up, exchanged polite farewells, and left with Mum. Silence hung heavy until we reached home. In the lounge, we sat down, exchanging glum looks. "I can't believe it," sighed Sue. "Me, in a primary school uniform. I'll be a laughingstock forever." "And what about me?" I retorted indignantly. A month dressed as a junior Scion schoolgirl among 12-year-olds. Despite our mood, even Sue managed a slight grin at the absurdity of it all. "Well," said Mum finally, breaking the silence, "you both will receive what you deserve. Hopefully, it'll teach you to think more carefully before you act so recklessly in the future. I love you both dearly, but this time, I'll ensure you fulfill every condition of your punishment to the letter. Don't expect any sympathy from me. Make the most of your next 2 weeks of holiday because the following month won't be much fun for either of you." The next 2 weeks passed swiftly, and before we knew it, the first day of our punishment had arrived. Mum had meticulously prepared our wardrobes with her usual efficiency. All our regular clothes were locked away, replaced by Emily's school uniform now occupying my wardrobe and chest of drawers. Emily was similarly equipped with St. Michael's uniforms delivered the previous week by Jennifer Taylor. The time had come to face the consequences of our actions. Mum woke us both up very early, and she helped me get dressed, realizing that Emily, though reluctant, at least had something familiar to put on, even if she hadn't worn it since she was 11. But in my case, I needed more assistance. Mum meticulously dressed me piece by piece in Emily's school uniform, the white vest, maroon knickers, crisply ironed white blouse with school tie, and then the grey gym tunic. She had to help me with every button down the back that I couldn't reach. She secured my feet in white ankle socks and a pair of brown T-bar sandals, buckling them securely, and finally, she topped it off with the maroon school blazer. Just when I thought that was the end, I realized there was one more item that would be incredibly humiliating for me. "Now Jack," Mum said with a slight smile, "Miss Williams has requested specifically that both you and Emily wear hair ribbons every day. It might be more embarrassing for you, but as I said, I'll make sure every instruction is followed. Now sit still." I resigned myself to what would become a daily ordeal. After parting my hair down the center, she gathered one side into a bunch and wound a white elastic band tightly around it. She repeated the process on the other side, leaving me with two conspicuously short bunches of hair. Taking a length of white hair ribbon, she wound it firmly around one bunch and tied it tightly in a non-slip bow. "Oh," I exclaimed. "That's too tight, Mum. It hurts." "Nonsense," she replied with a grin. "It has to be secure. Don't worry, you'll get used to it." She repeated the process with the other bunch of hair and added 2 pink plastic hair slides to secure the ribbons. As a final touch, she cut my hair across the front in a neat, even line to form a fringe. "There," she said with satisfaction. "Perfect. You look lovely. Your hair is quite long for a boy, so those ribbons aren't going anywhere. Now stand up and let's have a look at you." I complied, and just then, Emily entered the room in her dressing gown and burst out laughing at the sight. "Oh, how delightful!" Emily exclaimed. "What an absolutely adorable little schoolgirl. Let's take her downstairs." "Not yet, young lady," Mum smiled. "Now it's your turn to get dressed. Come on, I'll help you. Jack, you go downstairs and start your breakfast. We won't be long." She guided a reluctant Emily into her room while I headed downstairs, curious about how Sue would look. I sat at the table, munching on my corn flakes, while occasionally hearing Emily's protests echoing from upstairs. Finally, I heard them descending the stairs and turned to see. Mum led a sheepish, almost tearful Emily into the kitchen. Before me stood my twin sister, transformed into a perfect image of an 8-year-old primary school girl. She wore a blue and white check gingham dress buttoned up to the neck, complete with a white pointed collar. The short sleeves had white cuffs, and a pocket adorned with a white strip was neatly placed at the front. A belt with a white plastic buckle circled her waist, secured with a button at the end. Her feet were clad in white cotton ankle socks, neatly turned down, and brown Mary Jennifer T-bar strap shoes, buckled securely at the side. But it was her hair that drew my attention, styled just like mine, with a center parting, 2 large bows of white hair ribbon, 2 pink plastic hair slides, and a neatly cut fringe across the front. For a 14-year-old girl, the humiliation must have been profound, evident as tears welled in her eyes. I felt deeply sorry for her. Quietly rising from my chair, I walked over to her, took her hand, and gently squeezed it before guiding her back to the breakfast table. I looked into her tearful eyes and said, "Cheer up, sis. At least we've both got a shoulder to cry on." She glanced at me, managing a smile through her tears. "You're the best brother in the world," she said, wiping her eyes. Breakfast continued like any other morning ritual, and soon it was time to leave. Mum added just a bit more to our humiliation. First, she made Emily put on her royal blue primary school blazer. Then she remarked, "It's pouring rain this morning. Luckily, Sue, Miss Taylor has given you a lovely Macintosh rain cape, just like the ones you used to wear when you were little. She insists you wear it to school if it's raining." Mum fetched it from the hall and presented Emily with a red rubberized cotton rain cape. Emily's grimace of distaste spoke volumes as she eyed the rain cape skeptically. Yes, she grinned as she examined it. This will be perfect for a primary school girl. Let's see if it fits. Jennifer Taylor said it would be plenty big enough. Emily stood there, utterly miserable, while Mum draped the cape around her shoulders and fastened the buttons down the front. The rubbery scent of the cape, reminiscent of her grey school mackintosh, filled the air as it hung just below her knees. It fit perfectly, much to Emily's obvious dismay. "There," said Mum, "that'll keep you nice and dry. Oh, but we mustn't forget to put up your hood, must we? We don't want your pretty hair ribbons to get wet." She relished rubbing it in as she pulled up the pointed pixie hood of the rain cape, fastened it under Emily's chin, and tugged it forward to ensure it covered her head properly. Stepping back, she grinned and said, "There we are, one little girl all ready for the rain. Now, for number 2. Jack, go and get Emily's school mackintosh." Reluctantly, I fetched Sue's mackintosh from the hall and handed it to Mum. In no time, she had me buttoned into it, the belt securely fastened, and the hood pulled over my head, tying the tapes in a bow under my chin. "All right, girls," Mum grinned, "off you go. I won't lecture you on the consequences of being late for school, but let's just say you'd regret it. Emily, report to Miss Taylor when you get there, and Jack, report to Miss Williams. Now, off you both go, and stay out of trouble." With that, she opened the door, and Sue and I ventured out into the heavy downpour. The wind whipped the rain against my mackintosh, and despite the discomfort, I was almost grateful to be wearing it. The rain seeped through onto my bare legs and soaked my feet in their short ankle socks and sandals. As we walked, the wet mackintosh hem slapped against my legs, and the hood limited my view, making me feel quite childish. I dreaded running into any of my friends on their way to school. Yet, my heart went out to Sue, her face framed in the adorable pixie hood of her little girl rain cape. It must have been dreadful for her. Eventually, we reached the primary school and had to part ways. "Watch out for the older girls," Sue warned. "They can be mean. Stay away from them. Good luck, and I'll see you tonight." "Bye, Sue," I replied. "Just do what they say, and think of me too. See you later." My sister entered the primary school gate, appearing as a rain-soaked, red-caped little primary school girl. Meanwhile, I had to make my own way to Sion Convent. Can't be late on the first day. After a few minutes, I arrived at Sion Convent, joining a crowd of girls in mackintoshes as we entered through the main gate and into the school. Inside, girls were removing their mackintoshes to hang them up, but I simply untied my hood and let it hang down my back. I approached the door to the headmistress' study and knocked. My first day at Sion had officially begun.